Ciao ragazzi, io sono Formaggio. This is my KBD75, which is also my very first build. I installed these Kailh BOX Navy switches from Novelkeys, and it's probably going to stay as my daily driver until I graduate college. These are highly anticipated switches, and I would like to share some opinions on this switch, but before that I would like to provide some background. When I was getting my first few mechanical keyboards, I didn't like the long travel of the keys because I was previously used to low-profile chiclet style keyboards commonly found on laptops. So I decided to test my luck on low-profile key switches. The one that interested me the most was a Havit low-profile 10 keyless keyboard. After watching many reviews, I decided to give them a try. I received the keyboard and the switches were basically linear with a click. However, that wasn't the end. After all those reviews I watched, I discovered some potential in them. These low-profile switches are from Kailh. I got these loose switches from Novelkeys. However, keep in mind, these blue low-profile switches that are available on these commercial keyboards are different from the ones here. Although they look the same, the keycap mount and the slider is ever so slightly different that they're not compatible with each other. The mechanism that interested me the most was the click bar. Instead of the more common click jacket found on Cherry MX Blues and many other clones, these introduced a totally new mechanism to provide the tactility and the click. I personally found a lot of potential in them. If you see here, you can see that there's a bump on the slider that has to go through the click bar in order to register. At some point, the click bar slips past the bump, hitting the retainer. This produces the sharp click. However, there's an interesting quirk about this design. Even on the upstroke, the bump has to pass the click bar once again. This means that there's a click even on the upstroke, and also it means that if the spring is not strong enough, the switch wouldn't be able to return. So I started crude modding these switches. Using a tool, I first stretched out the click bar like so it will be stiffer than its usual state. Next, I stretched out the spring so that it will be also stiffer, so that it wouldn't have any problems trying to return to its normal state. As a result, I ended up with this monstrosity. Now these switches are extremely tactile. Although they are very inconsistent, I would say that this mod definitely caught my attention, and as soon as Mike from Novelkeys confirmed that he was working on box thick click switches, I was extremely excited. After months of my obsession on these switches, the Box Navy and Jade switches were finally in stock, and I ordered 100 of them each. These were my first impressions. These switches are very tactile. Easily the most tactile switches I've ever tried, not that I've tried many anyways, but many say that they're on par with BKE Redux heavy domes, and now that's saying something. However, these are not perfect and definitely not for everyone. In fact, if you try the loose switches individually, especially the Jades, they don't particularly feel all that good. Let's not even talk about the slow return of the Jades. They might have that insane tactility, but they just feel somewhat incomplete. This leads to possibly the biggest flaw of these switches. If you noticed earlier, the bump on the slider is shaped like a wedge. Let me try and demonstrate the situation going on with this nail clipper, which is also shaped like a wedge. If you run your fingernails on the surface, it feels relatively fine, and when your finger slips off the side, the tactility feels almost pleasant. However, now try running your fingernail the other way around. Now it feels very scratchy and almost intimidating. Do you understand what's going on here? On the downstroke, the click bar has to slip past the sharp end of the bump, which makes it feel somewhat unpleasant. I will say that it can feel like off-roading with a car without suspensions. In fact, I know exactly how this feels like. Yes, it feels exactly like breaking a mechanical pencil lead while trying to write. Not a very satisfying feeling if I'm being honest. As a result, you get this feeling that the upstroke might feel better than the downstroke, which is a shame because otherwise they might be the nearly perfect switches for clicky and tactile lovers. I would say that if the bump on the slider was more curved or was in the shape of a mountain instead of a wedge, then I would say that they would have felt much better in my opinion. One more thing to note is that these switches have a shorter but more noticeable hysteresis due to the click bar. Even though the hysteresis might be much shorter than Cherry MX Blues, they feel more prominent due to the click bar. During the downstroke, the click bar provided extra resistance for that tactility. The same goes for the upstroke. Since the click bar also provides resistance against the upstroke, you have to lift off your fingers more than you might think in order to make the switch reset properly. Sometimes you will end up typing the same key twice because of this. Additionally, the actuation point is slightly below the click, which means that you can input the keys multiple times without resetting the switch. This, for example, is registering the key each time I go up and down. Because of this, I wouldn't recommend these for gaming. Double tapping on these switches are quite difficult and physically demanding. I would rather recommend pale blues for gaming. All in all, these switches are great. They're not perfect, but the tactility is as high as you can get on any MX style switch in the market, or probably any switch really. I wouldn't really recommend Jade switches because they feel clunky and unrefined due to the slow return and the harsh tactility. However, the Navy switches reduce the harshness and often scratchy feeling tactility of the Jade, and that makes them feel much better. They're quite heavy at close to 95 grams of force to actuate. This thing is 480 grams, and you can see that they can actuate 5 keys at once barely. You definitely need some getting used to, however it will be all up to preference. I personally like how I don't fat finger the keys as much as before. I hope you enjoyed this review, and the following is a typing test of the Box Navies with Maxkey SA Doubleshot ABS keycaps.